Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good everything. My name is Joe Lurie, and I want to thank you once again for joining us through all the Tech Community Live AMAs today. It's nice to see you all again. And for those of you that stayed with us for all of them, again, thank you so much for your support. Today's AMA, or this AMA, Ask Microsoft Anything on visibility and control across devices with Intune. I'm going to let my panel introduce themselves as they answer questions, because we only have a few minutes. Like, we only have 30 minutes with you all. So we're going to talk about visibility and control. Actually, before we get to the first question, I will let them introduce themselves because I haven't had a chance to look for questions yet. We're going to go just the way I see you, clockwise. So Dune, then Iris, and Carlos. Dune, tell us what you do with regarding visibility and control across devices with Intune.
Nice. Yeah. I think visibility and control are super central to all things in Intune, really. Yeah. I'm Dune. I'm a product manager. I work on, I've been on the team for about 10 years, working on Config Manager first and then Intune. Working right now on kind of what are all the cool agentic and Copilot scenarios that we can plug into Intune, but I've done a lot of work in my time on reporting and other things as well.
Cool. Iris?
Hello, I'm Iris Mungia. Great to be back for another AMA. I work on the Apple devices for Intune, and similar with what Joe and Dune talked about, visibility to me in Intune is all about you understand the life cycle, and we give you the data and the reporting is needed for all of the devices you're managing. And in my case specifically, are Apple devices. So really excited to be here and answer your questions.
Thanks, Iris. Carlos?
Hi, I'm Carlos. I'm in the same team as Joe. I'm a PM architect in the customer experience engineering team. Been with Microsoft for about 18 years, going on 19. And my current focus is on co-piloting Intune and agents, helping our customers deploy our newest, greatest, and latest things. And to me, I think visibility and control is co-piloting Intune. I think it's a perfect fit along with agents. Is really being able to have a really clear view of your real estate, so that you can understand, what users are experiencing, and to be able to quick take action to make sure everyone's having the best experience and the device is kept safe and secure.
It's actually, Iris and Carlos, you actually went right into answering my first question, which is, what does good visibility actually look like in Intune, and how do you know when you don't have it? And really, you can't manage what you don't see, what you don't know is there. And so good visibility, Dune, I don't think you actually, during your introductions, if you mention anything, to you in your role, your current role, and even in your past roles, because that comes into the how do you know when you don't have it? What does good visibility look like in what you're doing today?
It's a good question.
Versus what you did in the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the dream really always is putting data in front of administrators at the moment they need it, and building trust in that data being verifiable and kind of confirmably true in the real world. And not all data is going to be instantaneously piped through. So also, if we have having the right timestamps everywhere, so we can understand and make sure that our customers understand as well, like what frequency data points are updated at, which data points are sourced from the cloud versus which are sourced directly from the endpoint, which we only want to do when we don't want to do that all the time to be clogging the network, that kind of thing. So transparency of where does the data come from, how old is the data, and how relevant is the data really to what customers are trying to do. That's, to me, the most important visibility.
Carlos, you and I are on the same team. We both talk to customers all the time. And one of the things that I hear from customers a lot is they want something like multi-device query to be real time, as opposed to collected data, where single device query or device query is real time. So that goes into what Dune was just saying. How old is the data? How accurate is the data? We don't want to clog the network. So when you talk to customers, Carlos, about like multi-device query, that's pretty close to real time, right?
Yeah. I think to me it's key, right? I think administrators' time is is really critical, right? They have tons of things that they need to take care of. And I think having the most up-to-date data, and I think as Dune pointed out, making sure that they have clear visibility of when data is refreshed, right? Because, well, we're always going to have data updating at different times, but I think having that clear understanding of how up-to-date the data that I'm dealing with is informs me of what actions I need to take, right? Instead of potentially taking actions that are no longer necessary, right? Because in my latest data updates, I may have a completely different picture of my environment that no longer requires me to take action A. I may need to take action B, right? So to me, like data freshness and understanding of the data that I'm looking at, it's really critical for admins to be able to take the right decisions at the right time.
Yeah, for sure. We got a question that came in. How can I quickly tell whether a problem is caused by the Intune service, the device, or something else, like something in Entra? And I see this question a lot when it comes to when I talk to customers. I went to deploy a policy or an app, and I kind of talked about this in one of the other sessions today, and it didn't come down. It's because they're using a dynamic group, which simply was an Entra issue that it didn't calculate yet. So how can I tell, though, if the problem that I'm seeing is it an Intune service, the device, or something in Entra? Is there something in Intune that can help me find out where that problem is coming from?
I'll take a stab at answering this one. I think this is a troubleshooting type question, right? Which for me, troubleshooting is an art. I think every person is gonna, have a different way of tackling troubleshooting. But to me, I think it's important to start with where the problem lies. Like, are you seeing the outcome of the problem related, for example, to identity, to sign in, to authentication, that would lead to understand whether are you having potentially a directory type problem, or is the issue just presenting itself with devices potentially not receiving policies that are really specific to Intune, in which case you should shift your focus to potentially Intune. And then I think determining whether or not it's a device specific or a service specific issue, in my opinion, is how broad is the problem that you're seeing. Typically speaking, if you're having a service level problem, you're going to see the problem manifest itself in a much larger scale, right? Then you're likely dealing, if you're talking about several devices or users potentially experiencing similar problems, that tends to point potentially to something broader than just a single device. That kind of would lead you to believe that the service, may be the right place to start. And then we have a great place in the console, right? Looking at the troubleshooting, we post all message center and service health related issues in there. Taking a quick look at those things right away, that will save you from potentially spending a whole bunch of time troubleshooting client-side issues or user-level issues when we clearly have it delineated, as a service issue in our portal.
Dune, looking at some of the agents, is there an agent that I could use, or could I, if I want to use Copilot, say I do see it only on one device so far, only one user is called the help desk, where I can compare this device policies, apps, settings, user to other ones in their same persona or in the same group?
Yeah, totally. I think, I think Explorer is probably a great fit there. Really, it's, and that's not an agent, but it's a Copilot feature in Intune. That one it's kind of like the latest and greatest, most powerful reporting capability that we have. And the great thing about it is that it reaches across the data that you traditionally see in reports in Intune, and data that comes in from inventory and a bunch of different sources. So it allows you to really pivot across different data that you see in Intune and track down that kind of, how do I differentiate specifics between what policies might be set up for a device and how conflicts can get created.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just to add to this too, we have, as part of the Copilot chat, the embedded experience in Intune. admins have the ability to quickly just compare a device with another, which is one of the features that we hear a lot that customers really like, because having to do this manually would take a significant amount of time. And with Copilot, you can simply indicate what device that you want to compare to that may be healthy with a device that may be unhealthy, and it quickly tells you the differences in terms of configuration policies, compliance policies, and even applications that may be deployed, or even in the case of EPM type policies that may be potentially blocking certain applications or the user from accessing something, that you can quickly get there with Copilot and Intune capabilities, as well as the ability, as Dun mentioned, to be able to quickly identify policy conflicts, right, that may have led to the device not acting the way it should, or potentially causing problems that the end user may be reporting.
Yeah, I want to add one more point on top of what Carlos and Dean mentioned. I think Carlos talked about, first of all, what is the essence of the service? Is it about the Intune, or is it part of identity? Then likely is more Entra. And second, Carlos mentioned is the scalability. How large of a scale is the problem? On top of that, I think we also, as a product feature team, try to distinguish or find creative ways to make sure the burden is not on customers anymore. So, for example, Apple on the team, we are doing DDM, which is the declarative device management, which is moving a lot of the stuff to device itself. And then to that point, if we are providing more of a rolling out for the device native service, then when it comes to the issue, then it will be more clear cut line in between if it's a service or if it's on the device. So on top of that, I just want to make sure that we are also having more creative ways to think about it as Intune as a whole team, to help you to release the burden for you to figure out who should I reach out to. That question will be simplified with our solution too.
I think that's a great addition, Iris, for mentioning that we don't want you to do all the troubleshooting work. We're trying to make that as seamless to you as necessary. And of course, you'll have to do some troubleshooting, but we are trying to take that burden off of you. All right, so one of you mentioned compliance a second ago, so I'm going to go right into this next question. Why does a device, and this again, this isn't really designed to be a troubleshooting AMA, but it may turn into one. Why does a device show different compliance or health states across different views? If I look at the portal, if I look at a report, if I look at company portal directly on the device, I might see different compliances or different health states. Why would that happen?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I think that's a great question. Go ahead, Dun. I'll give you the first.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, first of all, it shouldn't happen. Ideally, I know that it does, but the team, that would be another place where, like, really anywhere where that happens, the team is endeavoring to close those. Internally, I think we have this principle of we really shouldn't be showing the same data from two sources in any place. No matter how many times we can show, hey, look, they show the same thing here, so maybe we can just use a different source. We know that that's kind of a recipe for disaster. So wherever possible, we try not to do that. The reality is right now, sometimes you can see that. There's a bunch of different reasons for that. In the case of, for example, company portal versus service, that could be because a local compliance calculation has happened and the service isn't yet aware of it. So that can be one reason why you might see a difference. If there's a problem with device check-in, then you could have out of sync things happening. And then also occasionally we might have, in cases where we haven't yet closed that gap, but we have two different data sources that update on different frequencies. We can still have both that are honest, but if they're not perfectly in phase, then you might see one that's slightly different from the other, at least for some period of time. Hopefully it's transient, and hopefully as a team, we can work on closing those inconsistencies. It's something we definitely think about a lot.
Carlos, you were going to say something before. Do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I think this goes back to what we talked when we first started, right? Is really trust, right? Trusting in the data that's provided. And, I think as Dun mentioned, we have data showing in different places that may have different refresh intervals. And we don't necessarily, in all the different places, have timestamps for when those pieces of information were updated. So in reality, it may not be that they are really showing different status. They're just showing different status at different points in time, right? But that still makes it really confusing for our customers. We hear this, quite often. It's something that we're, taking a look, broadly, because we have a couple of places in the portal where data is coming from different places. But we totally understand, I think, the feedback there that, having data shown in different places for devices with different status is definitely very confusing. And again, like we talked about, presenting information to the admins that they can take the right action is key. And then providing the right status is critical for that to happen, right? If you don't provide the right information for you when you're about to take action, then you may potentially be taking an action that has already, been updated over time.
Yeah, for sure, especially if it's a compliance thing, because it's possible that a remediation script is just coming down to the machine because you happen to notice that company portal says non-compliant, but the service already noticed it, and it's already sent a remediation script or something like that. So it could be a matter of timing. I'm not telling you to sit and wait, but as Dune said, you shouldn't see different things. You might just happen to have noticed at a different time. All right, so we got a question about some AI features, and we are talking about troubleshooting, so it's a very relevant question. Will Intune's AI features, or Security Copilot and Intune, start helping us move from reactive troubleshooting to more of a proactive monitoring, so issues are caught before the users report them? And so, Dune, I'm going to start with you first on this one. I think all three of you can shed some light on this answer.
Yeah, I think this one is, the proactive monitoring and reporting and identifying issues before you get that help desk call, that's been the holy grail for over a decade, before AI, certainly. But AI can help us in this way because there's opportunities for us to kind of figure out opportunities for automation that maybe weren't there before. I think, and maybe one of the other speakers will call me out on this, but I think we've still got a ways to go before we can claim that we do that now. Okay, Carlos is nodding. Good. I've forgotten something. But it's certainly something that we think about all the time in terms of how can we leverage some of the new tech that's out there to be able to be proactive and get out there. There's been past endeavors to do this, right? Things like compliance notifications would be an example of something where a state change in the service causes a notification that goes to the admin that can allow them to remediate, or even the end user sometimes. I think that's one that we can get credit for as well, if we can let the user know before they have a problem, if they need to take some action. But it's kind of the next frontier that we've been pushing on, and I'm pretty confident that AI and Copilot are going to help us get there, really. We're still taking baby steps, but I think we're headed in that direction.
Iris, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, probably not really specific for AI in general, because I feel like Dune covered that. But just in general, for the feature-wise, speaking for Apple devices, we have enabled the Apple log collection. We're gonna do it in the future, in the coming quarter. That's part of what Apple provides to us from the latest WWDC. So the way we are thinking about for you to be easier troubleshooting is provide more visibility in the log collection, making it easier for that. And of course, with that log collection being more automated in the coming term, that can also help us for Dune and Carlos to have their AI features be more have more information and visibility into how device is functioning. So I kind of see it as a full cycle. Just want to add on top of what are the potential feature we're thinking for that.
Carlos?
Yeah, Joe, I think as you mentioned, we talk to customers all the time. I think that's kind of one of the main points of feedback is that they tell us, you have all of our data. Tell us, what areas we should focus on, right, as we start our day. So that's definitely been a very consistent piece of feedback there. And I think, critical to what we're talking about giving the admin the information they needed when they need it. The right time to provide them that information is before an incident occurs, right? A user reports an issue to help desk. And I think critical to that change is really also allowing the admin to leverage the power of AI in the flow of their work, right? Because if you can minimize potentially the amount of mistakes that admins can make right when they're creating things, right? You potentially minimize potential pinpoints that can occur afterwards when those collaterals are created, whether it's a policy or a new application that has been deployed. So definitely something that we've heard lots of feedback on, and something that we are evaluating to see ways that we can leverage AI in a way that we can make admins be the heroes, right? Instead of the zeros, right? Because once you get help desk calls, users already potentially facing some downtime and issues, and admins always want to be on the proactive side of things. So it's us being able to empower them to deliver that kind of experience is critical.
Yeah, agreed. And I think it's like we collect information, as you said. You can collect all the information you want into an advanced analytics, but if the admin's not actually reviewing that and then creating things like remediation scripts or doing things, then you almost have to rely on either a user to call a help desk, or hopefully an AI agent to come along that will just start collecting data and creating these kinds of remediations. But I think collecting the data is one piece of it. But if you want to be proactive, sometimes you might have to do something with that data, create those scripts or whatever is necessary to deploy the updated application. We have another question that came from tech community about lost and stolen devices, I think. Let me read the whole question. Inactive devices in our tenant are deleted after 6 months. If we have a device that was lost or stolen, what is the best way to approach this scenario on laptops, iOS devices, Android devices? Our goal is to make the device unusable by whoever has it, like lock it on the user enrollment screen until a valid Azure admin is used to re-enroll it. And I'm going to say, I'm glad that they specified Windows, iOS, right? You can assume Mac OS, Android all separately, because every OS is going to handle this situation differently. And I'm going to start with Iris because she's here to talk about Apple. So what's the scenario here for iOS devices, Mac OS devices?
Yeah, I would say 2 thoughts on when I see this question. First of all, there's an action ribbon that is all of the actions related to Apple devices is on top of there. There's a wipe, there's a retire, and that is where I would recommend starting when there's a device is either lost or stolen. So wiping the device is probably the safest way to do it, to make sure that all of your company's MDM profile is not attached to the device anymore. And then even if they by any chance they get access and still able to log into the device, they cannot use anything that is related to your company anymore. At least that's the starting point I would recommend. And second of all, last year in Ignite, we also introduced a device offboarding agent, which is also a great practice for the devices when it's either not active or when it's to the special cases. So these are the 2 things I would recommend starting with. Then is also case by case on what's the scenario of the device. Then we can talk about it in a more specialized scenario. But definitely starting with the action ribbon to secure your device first.
And one thing, and we have Abigail is not here. She's in our background answering the same question for Android. I'm just going to quickly say about Windows, we don't have remote lock for Windows, so your options are a little bit different for Windows. For example, probably a wipe or reset is your best way to make sure that any data that's on the device is wiped if that device is lost or stolen. But ideally, you don't have any data on the device, right? The North Star is to not store data on the device. Carlos and Dune, do you want to add on to what Iris was saying?
No, I think she covered well. I think just for Windows, Joe, I think one other option, I think for a lost device for Windows, you can also locate the device. If the device obviously is still active at some point in time, locating the device is an option for a Windows device. But you're right, that there's no real great way of blocking the login, with the exception of what Iris mentioned also for other devices. Wiping the device would essentially prevent them from accessing any corporate data on that specific device, right? And as the device would not be enrolled, they would not even be able to sign into the device with an Entra account anymore unless the device gets re-enrolled. So I think those are fairly viable options, but they all still kind of depend on the device is still being brought back online, right, for any action to be taken, on those devices. Over to you, Dun.
Yeah, I'll say two more. There's a whole bunch of tools in your tool belt for this one. One tool is the compliance of the device, right? So you can mark that device as not compliant, and then as long as you have your conditional access stuff set up, then at least the user won't be able to interact with their corporate data on that device. They'll get the, oops, you can't get there from here. And as much as that might not completely prevent them from using the device, at least they're not accessing their corporate data. And then sometimes on some of these platforms, there's also the nuclear option on Windows. I know that, sometimes people will reach for BitLocker keys and that kind of thing to really prevent the device from coming up at all. That's like danger zone. It's not a good experience. So it depends on the severity of what's going on. But certainly if you wanted to say, this device is not going to start up, then you have options to do that. But that's not quite as graceful as locking you on the enrollment screen. that would be blue screen territory.
Exactly. All right, thanks. I think we have time for one more question, or maybe a couple more questions, and I'm off on my timing. And Dun, you had mentioned that sometimes we surface different information or the same information in different portals across into an admin center. When it comes to there being different information in the different views, do you recommend that we simply create custom dashboards?
I don't. Well, it's a tough question. I think it's tough because I want to be able to provide everything in Intune that you need from a reporting perspective, so that you don't need to go create custom dashboards. At the same time, we want to have flexibility for you to do so if you need it, because we also understand that every customer is unique in terms of the questions that you have and requirements that you might have. So when we're designing what our data surfaces are in Intune, we're thinking about how can we provide value for the most customers possible in terms of the native reporting and monitoring services that we provide. In terms of the consistency aspect, like I said, we really don't want that to happen. I certainly shouldn't think that you would need to right now build a custom report just to make sure that things are not there. But with some other tools in your tool belt, like single device query, for example, that will retrieve data right from a device, and a knowledge of the approximate refresh rate of some of these sources, you can reach for a specific device and confirm a detail, for example, in real time if you needed to really kind of get receipts that the data that you're looking at is the most accurate. But in general, it's our goal in the team to make sure that your data is up to date and it's consistent across where you're looking at.
Okay, I think we have time for one final question. So thank you, Dun, for answering that last one. How should we think about reporting delays and sync cycles when making decisions? And Carlos, I think you had mentioned earlier that different information syncs at different times within the portal. How should we think about that when we're starting to make our decisions?
Yeah, I think this goes back to what Dun said. I think you shouldn't really have to worry about that in the first place, right? I think it's for us to address, and most importantly, to provide you with the right data on what freshness each of the data that you're seeing is, if the data does need to be placed in different areas of the portal. But we all know kind of the reality is there are places where this will occur. I think the key here is really in the process of managing your devices, you're going to naturally identify, some of those areas that are areas of the portal that tends to have the fastest update time, right? So to me, as an admin, at least until we are able to address those data mismatch concerns, is figure out based on your flows, which are the areas of the portal that you have accustomed to having the latest data updates, and then if you need to act quickly, leverage those data points to move forward. But just wanted to reinforce the fact that this is one area that we totally understand that we have tons of customer feedback around, and it should be something that we address so you don't have to worry about this in the future.
For sure. And Carlos, because we're running out of time, I know we're doing these live hands-on workshops. Do you want to talk about those real quick?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for folks that are interested in starting their journey or even getting a refresh on their journey about Copilot in Intune and agents, we are hosting this monthly hands-on virtual lab sessions, usually the first couple weeks of each month, and other products at Microsoft are also offering similar workshops that you can take advantage of. Would love to see you there.
And you can find all those workshops at aka.ms/sc/workshops. Thank you all for joining. Iris, Dune, Carlos, thank you so much for this last 30 minutes or so. Very informative, very helpful. The QA for everyone out there who's watching this on demand, the question and answer period will actually go through 12 p.m. on Friday, June 26th. For those of you that watched me the last couple of episodes, I didn't even know that Friday's date was the 26th. I was saying somewhere around the 26th, but definitely Friday. It is definitely Friday, June 26th at 12 noon Pacific time. So keep those questions coming at aka.ms/TCL, that's Tech Community Live /Intune. And easily access all of these AMAs and leave your questions and comments there, and we'll answer them, as long as you ask before Friday at noon. All right, thanks everyone.